So, back at Silicon Beach, talking to Mark Earls, otherwise known as the Herdmeister. What's that all about? Tell us about you.
So I wrote a book called Herd about more than a decade ago now, and when I was writing it, I'd just left Ogilvy, and I was invited to go and speak at an American marketing conference, and they said, you must have a job title. I said, I don't have a job title. It says there's a field on the form which says job title. I said, I know. He said, well, I'm writing a book called Herd. Why don't you call yourself the Herd Captain? I thought, that sounds stupid. Herd Boss, wrong. Herdmeister. So that's why I'm a Herdmeister.
So you've just done another book you brought out in the last year. Copy.
Guess what that's about? Yeah, no, it's called, subtitle is How to Do Smarter Marketing by Using Other People's Ideas. And the basic premise of this is that the best way to try and solve problems is to use other people's ideas, because the problem you're facing is almost certainly one that someone else has faced, and almost certainly, if you think about it right, something that someone solved better than you could on your own.
Yeah.
So that's the idea.
Taking this sort of inspiration from what other people have done, do you think there's an issue in the West that we have with creativity, thinking that we have to do something that's never ever been seen before and pluck this totally original idea out of the air with this eureka moment, rather than taking inspiration from elsewhere or just developing what we've already done? Is there an issue with how we think of creativity and innovation?
I think that's absolutely right. That's spot on. I think it's a very romantic idea of creativity that we've got in the West, which is about the individual who, the clouds part, the sun comes through in a big shaft of light and suddenly you see it, or the muse wakes you in the middle of the night, or somehow your heroic overcoming of difficulties through caffeine or other stimulants will get you to the answer, and it'll be you on your own who's done this. I just think it's nonsense, and the history of innovation and creativity shows that it is, and looking across culture shows it's bollocks. So one, James Watt, the guy who invented the steam engine, didn't invent the steam engine, and he may have been really important in shaping the Industrial Revolution, but he didn't invent the steam engine. The steam engine was already in operation in British mines 50 years before. Watt's great genius was to take something that worked and make it work better by adding something to it. He had an external condenser unit to it. That was what he did. Well, of course, looking back, we go, James Watt did it. James Watt did it. And so he's the creative hero. But because we like that idea of heroes and individuals overcoming the barriers. The truth is he borrowed stuff that already existed. He borrowed stuff and he tweaked it. He had something that someone else was doing and tweaked the combination together. Steve Jobs, very inventive, you'd think, as the head of Apple. Not at all. Yeah. They've always done stuff that already existed, just made it better. They didn't even invent that graphic user interface. Other people were playing back with that for ages. Or the idea of an attractive device, electronic device. Other people were playing with that too. Didn't invent the smartphone, didn't invent the tablet, didn't invent streamable music, didn't invent downloadable music or mobile. All of that stuff other people had done. They just did it better.
Yeah, and currently they're not inventing the self-driving car, and they're also not inventing 360-degree sort of filming technology, apparently.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that they're not very good. It just means that the notion that we have of what makes creativity and innovation doesn't reflect the reality of it. No, so take for example Schumpeter, who's one of the great economic gurus of innovation history, and he's cited by a lot of startup economists and theorists. He said basically having an idea is not the important bit. It's not where value gets created. It's taking the idea and making something of value from it in the market. And we've split those two things up and created all the value culturally in having the idea piece, and not the other stuff. Now, you and I both know, Dave, because of the work that we've done in the past together, that it's that the hard bit is here. The hard bit is making stuff happen, and that's where you learn. So you learn. You can have, you go, I've got the idea. And you go, that's the idea. Fine. Now, how are we going to make that a reality? Yeah. Anyone who's ever worked in a business or an organisation knows that the making stuff happen is the inglorious hard yards. That's the difference between success and failure. So that's the kind of thing I'm championing, and it's overturning some cultural stuff that we've got in the West, which has been a couple of centuries worth of misguiding. our thinking.
So at the moment in organizations, when people are wanting to come up with ideas, they generally think that what they have to do is have a brainstorm and get a load of people in a room and throw a load of turds at a blanket and hope that there's something there of value. Is it, what needs to happen after that, or what needs to happen instead of that?
Okay, so I don't think the brainstorming itself is the problem. I think it's the questions that we ask of the kind of process, the way you go about things. And I've got two really important questions, or three important questions. The first is, what kind of problem is this? What kind of problem is this? What kind of behaviour we're trying to change, let's say, or what kind of business issue are we facing? The second question is, how have other people solved this kind of problem? Because, one of the great gifts we've got as human beings is the ability to outsource the cognitive load. We can access other people's experience through things like the internet, just as the latest version of that. Culture is throughout human history has helped us do that. So you don't have to store all the information and knowledge in here. You can go, Dave knows a bit about this, or Dave's mate knows a bit about this, and so on and so on. So that's the second thing. What kind of solutions have people done which successfully solved this kind of problem? And the third thing is, what would that look like? Because we're quite good, I think, in many organisations of being conceptual and quite flaky as a result. But until you make something practical, tangible, then it's still only going to be up there. Yeah. And most organisations need to have a thing to hold. Here's the thing, in order to take it seriously. Yeah. So 3 questions then. What kind of thing is this? What kind of solutions have other people tried? What does it look like?
Yeah. So you, as well as having done the book, you've got a deck of cards or a pack of cards that goes with it. Half the cards are blank. Yeah. And half the cards have got a load of suggestions. How is it that people use these?
Okay, so how people use these is, what I've done is I've boiled down, and some people say I've stolen, maybe I have, boiled down many behaviour change strategies that are relevant to marketing or to the public sector and across many different cultures. And I've sorted them into 4 groups, so 4 suits, if you like. Those 4 suits represent 4 different ways of choosing. So I've worked back from my third question now to my first question I was saying was important. So the first question we then go to is, how are people choosing in this particular context? For example, you might think about a new electronic device, or say a Fitbit kind of wearable tech thing. How do people choose in that market? Is it on the basis of A versus B versus C, or is it, let's say, on the basis of what other people are doing? Dave knows a bit about this because he does running. I'll ask Dave, or I've watched Dave. I've seen people like that, and other people, so that seems like a good one. That helps me choose. So if that's the case, that's how people choose, then I need to choose strategies and tactics from that corner of the map. Yeah. So I use that suit of cards to do that. And then thirdly, then you go, okay, so what does that look like? Let's say it's finding the expert makers of whatever, of technology like this. How do we engage them? What would that look like in our particular market? So it's a sort of practical way of taking this whole process forward. You don't have to use those cards, but it's a very useful archive. Like I say, more than 100 strategies boiled down and sorted out into 4 groups that are appropriate to the kind of behaviour you're trying to change. You might, however, go, I've got a bigger issue than that. It's not about human behaviour, it's about something else. It's about defining the problem becomes a difficult bit. So I met this wonderful guy a couple of years ago who I describe in the book, Martin Elliott, who's Professor of Paediatric Cardiac Surgery at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. And he's one of the leaders in the field, and he does operations on tiny kids like this, a week old, 2 weeks old. And those operations are really complicated, have a lot of experts, machines and wires and tubes and stuff plugging into them. And one afternoon, so the story goes, one afternoon, at the end of a long Sunday operating, he slumped in front of the Formula One highlights and realised a problem that they had in cardiac surgery was the same as the one that pit stop teams face. A very vulnerable individual who very accurately has to have these pipes and wires put in by a number of experts and then taken out again. It's essentially a handover problem. So once you realise it's a handover problem, you can look further and further away. Defining the problem, as so often in the case of innovation, is part of the a very large part of the answer. Once you work out what kind of problem you're dealing with, you can search the universe. So the cards are a very precise way of doing this, but you can also use this as the same approach to ask much bigger questions about what you're facing and launch into a much longer term search for solutions that might be appropriate to that kind of problem.
So from this, what would be your top tips for people who are working in an organisation and they are told that they need to come up with ideas and they might be a bit fearful because there's this idea that they have to come up with something that nobody's ever seen before? Yeah. What would be your sort of top tips to make that a bit easier for them?
Okay, I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that that's bollocks. The notion that you have to come up with an idea that no one's ever seen before, because there are very few problems that you're ever going to come across that no one's ever seen before, and most of those problems have been solved by somebody else. So why make it harder for yourself? Why not take a good solution from somewhere else, as far away as possible ideally, to the problem you've got in front of you? Why not do that? It's much easier. Don't worry about being creative, because you will create originality if you apply something from a long way away. So don't have to find something completely new no one's ever seen. Just find something from elsewhere that solves the problem in front of you. Yeah. That's it.
Fantastic. Mark, thank you very much.
Very well. You don't have to write a novel. You don't have to write a film. You don't need to draw to use your creativity.